Hey everyone, and welcome back to another altered video. No live gameplay this week. We're going to be reviewing one of the games from last week because it was a banger and I made a few mistakes talking it through. Probably should have never ended up in the situation we were in, but we did manage to claw it back. Spoiler warning. If you want to go back and see the live gameplay, it's from the last week's video of Basira and Kaizaimon. And for reference, this is the deck we were running. Spoiler alert, the cuts that we end up making as a result of this previous video are the blade dancers, this common Aklut, and the two pastry chefs. I am a little bit tired because it's late.
Ooh, that's bad.
So if I make any mistakes, I apologize. But I did come prepared. I've made notes. So hopefully they can get me through it.
That's good.
Also, I appear to be sitting on a set of keys.
That's bad.
So I'm going to change that just before getting into the game. But let's jump in.
Can I go now?
And here we are at the start of the game, playing second against Fen and Crowbar with an opening hand of 6. We'll just be going through the video muted at double speed off of the YouTube page. Unfortunately, it means a slight drop in quality as we're recording a second time, but we'll have to deal. Alright, of these 6 cards, there are 2 I'm immediately looking at as insta-keeps, those being the Tiny Djinn and the 3 Little Pigs. The Djinn lines up well with some of the other cards in our hand. Ramps us on turn 2, and the 3 Little Pigs as the only instance of this effect in our deck. Now that we've replaced the second version with the Haven Warrior, we want to try and keep that combo and hope that it comes together. Of the other 4 cards, I'm instantly looking at Duel of Grit as one to get rid of. Better in the mid to late game when you can play those higher value creatures and get rid of something of theirs, no questions asked. But not very good in the opening turns. Won't be able to use it if we experience a 2 or 3 drop from our opponent, given that we've got the Tiny Djinn. There are valid reasons for keeping Keylon Cylinder, Haven, and the Mess. Keylon Cylinder as a 1-drop, slightly less incentivized for our opponents to remove, as the likely removal that we will be coming up against in Cloth Cocoon and Requiem are both mana negative plays, so if we invest 1 mana now, if they want to get rid of it, it'll cost them 2 or 3 on a later turn. Haven represents the most added power to the board going throughout the game, and the Mess is a good one to get down early as it lets us start accruing those counters to take advantage of later. As the Haven will be a bit of a lightning rod even at the common version for those removal spells that we were talking about, and the Keylon Cylinder doesn't use our mana efficiently on turn 1, we do end up deciding to go with the Mess. And I think I can skip ahead a little bit here. Alright, there we are. Our opponent has given us the best possible start by playing a 3-drop and using all of their mana, which means that our Tiny Djinn, even with its minimal stats, that actually line up very poorly against the Magpeng, will let us play out our Mess, get the counter on there, and trade 1 for 1, which is good. That's where we want to be. Alright, taking the play on turn 2. For turn, we've drawn both a Haven Bouncer and a Seringar. Sabotage is good against Fen, because you've always got access to a card to discard, as they're always putting 1 into the reserve. However, Tiny Djinn plus the Haven Seringar utilizes our turn 2 mana better, and playing out 2 creatures adds 2 counters to the Mess as well. So when we go through, we're probably talking through that now very quickly, thinking about the bouncer but ultimately getting rid of it. We'll jump forward a little bit here, and as you can see, the bouncer has left our hand and we've played out the Tiny Djinn. Alright, our opponent has thrown a sleight of hand into their reserve from the mana zone. So we expect they might be able to swap something from their hand into reserve using that one. And as they're going through and making that decision, I'll explain what they actually do. So they play a sleight of hand from hand, which is a bit of a signal for us as returning the Magpeng Hoarder to hand, but wanting to keep something in reserve implies that they want to preserve the cards that they're playing. It all becomes very obvious when they throw a Hathor into reserve, as it'll be able to return one of those sleight of hands back to their hand and let them cycle through more cards, use it as a bit of an after you effect. And had they used the sleight of hand, I've said that a lot of times now, from reserve, there would be nothing for it to return there. So they will be playing out the Magpeng Hoarder, and we're threatening on both sides with the Seringar. They do have a choice to make here. So the text on their Magpeng Hoarder reads, if there are 2 or more cards in reserve, it gains 2 boosts, otherwise it gains 1. And as they take their turn, we'll actually see them return the card from hand, from reserve to hand immediately. So they could have gained an extra boost on their Magpeng, but in the situation that they're in right now, it actually doesn't matter. They can block us on either side and take it to trade 1 for 1 no matter what. So slight optimization on our opponent's part, doesn't actually matter, and they're probably just playing loose because, again, it's irrelevant. We ramp and we gain those 2 counters on our mess, and we face another choice. So we've got a Keylon Cylinder and the Haven Warrior unique. It's usually better to continue putting cards into the mana zone where you can, but we're in a situation where it's advantageous for us to immediately trade the ramp advantage that we had for an extra card due to the awkward mana values that we have in hand. So 2 4-drops plus a 2-drop, we could have played out both of these cards, but we would have accrued no value from either of the effects. Obviously playing out the Haven Warrior without being able to give it a boost means we miss out on the ramp of that. We are also unable to play the 3 little pigs safely, because if they do have a Requiem or Cloth Cocoon in hand, which are the cards that we're very scared of at the moment, in response to us playing the pigs, they would be able to remove the mess. We get no cards out of it, and we get no boost out of the piggy too. So what we do is we actually skip the opportunity to put a card into mana, let our opponent catch up, and play the Keylon Cylinder for insurance. We sacrifice a little bit of tempo now in order to set ourselves up better for future turns. Having the 2 landmarks out, ensures us against the removal. We get the boost, so we can actually recoup the ramp if we take this line as well, by dropping the Haven Warrior on the following turn. Now this is a bit of an awkward one for us, because by keeping the cylinder we want to play that. We obviously want to play out the Seringar as well, but that only uses 3 of our 5 mana. Our opponent continues to cycle cards through, and they show us an Anansi. So a lot of power from our opponent is being represented right now. Currently they can only play either the Anansi or the Magpeng Hoarder because of that sleight of hand. However, as we progress, we actually make a bit of a misplay up here. So I'm going to let it run out. I believe I comment on it during the play, but in response to their Martingale, we probably should have played our Serengar out on that side as well. Instead, we actually choose to play it out on the companion side. Again, a bit of a foolish decision, because they can just play the Anansi out, block us, and go 0 for 2. Whereas had we played the Haven Serengar out on the Martingale side, it would have blocked her, and they would have just taken either a 1 for 1 by playing the Anansi out where they did, or if they played both of their cards out on the same side, taking a 0 for 1. So that's a mistake on our part. Now, our opponent has represented a Cloth Cocoon that they resupplied in with their hero's ability, and that is one of the cards that we were talking about earlier. A little bit scared of it because getting rid of our mess at the moment would take our card advantage engine offline, but instead our opponent swaps a sleight of hand back to hand and puts Magpeng Hoarder in there as well. It gives them access to its support ability on this turn. However, I don't believe they would want to use that because putting the sleight of hand back into hand implies they want to bring something back. Now, as we progress through the turn, they advance 0 for 2, which is rough for us, and then they have a choice to make. So they have to get rid of one of their cards, either the Martingale, the Cloth Cocoon, or the Magpeng Hoarder. And we're very happy to see that the Cloth Cocoon goes. They will be playing second on the following turn, so we will be able to draw a 1 card with our mess. That may have factored into their decision. However, I do feel like that is a bit of a mistake. Obviously, the 1-drop Martingale would be suitable, but it lines up poorly on both sides for them at the moment. So as we can progress on blue, it contributes nothing there, and as they can only progress on blue on their hero side, it doesn't actually help them progress there either. So they can reduce the value of a card, which does come into play later, but honestly, I'm more than happy for them to do that if it means they don't get rid of both of our landmark-based engines. The boosts from the Keylon cylinder are very important. We actually sacrificed ramp advantage in order to get that into play this turn, and obviously drawing cards is a big deal too, which also factors in to the result of this game. Alright, so we'll go to the next turn. We've drawn a Serengar and our Foundry Armourer, which is a pretty big deal considering we are planning to ramp this turn with both the Haven Warrior and the Tiny Djinn. So there is a small risk that you run using the Warrior, where if it triggers and you put the top card of your deck into mana, it can get rid of your one copy of the Foundry Armourer, or the pigs if you don't have them. So having both in hand here is actually a pretty big deal. Because we are drawing a card off of the mess this turn, basically the first thing that we're going to do, we do choose to send the Serengar to the mana zone. In theory, we could have held on to that and used all of our mana. Both the Tiny Djinn and the Haven Warrior together cost the 5 that we had, but it does open us up next turn to being able to use any 2-drops that we draw. So, you know, it's not just about hitting that 7 mana benchmark to be able to play out these 2 specific cards, but as we're far enough away from winning that we know we're going to have extra turns, got to think about the game a little bit more long term as well. So we activate the mess, we draw an extra copy of the mess, which we could in theory play, but not this turn, because we are heavily locked into double ramping here. In order to affect that, we do need to play out the tiny Djinn first, so we can target it with the Basira trigger and use the Keylon cylinder to activate our Haven Warrior. Our opponent continues to cycle, bringing the Magpeng Hoarder back and a second copy of Martingale, which does come into play. And we potentially make a bit of a mistake here. Because we know the two high power cards that our opponents could play in the Anansi and the Magpeng Hoarder, there is a little bit of credence to dropping both cards that we want to play on the same side, and that would just sort of force our opponent to potentially trade 1-for-1, whereas playing them both out opens us up to losing both sides, which is what eventually happens. So we've given our opponent 2 free expeditions here that we potentially could have avoided, keep the game a little bit closer. So we're going to have to think about that moving forward. I definitely am in the habit of not thinking my turns through quick enough or well enough to avoid those situations. But that's part of the review process. If we watch these games back and we figured out what it is that we did wrong, we can adjust and be better players for it. So the 2 Martingales being available lets our opponent actually block us from advancing on both sides, and we're in pretty dire straits. If our opponent wins 1 expedition, we lose the game. The good thing is that taking that turn, we're ahead by 2 mana again, and we're going to try and leverage that into stonewalling our opponent for the remainder of the game. As we go through, they'll get to play first. We look at our hand. We've got a Duel of Grit and a Haven Bouncer. The Sabotage, again, being good at many points in the game because it stops our opponent from playing what they resupply in with Fen. And we're keeping the Duel of Grit over the mess because we don't need a 3rd landmark. I misspeak about this in the original video, claiming that maybe the 2nd mess is of some value because we would be getting an ungodly amount of counters on both of them, but one of the trade-offs of running the rare mess instead of the common version is that it's non-token creatures only. So we're in a situation where we can play out our full combo and the 2-drop that we have in hand, but we are in the advantageous position, I would say, of knowing exactly what is available to our opponent, barring that 1 card that they've drawn, and we can interact with their 3 cards in reserve. Obviously they get a chance to play out something first, so it'll likely be, if we sabotage something, it'll be the 2nd best of the 4 cards that they have, but we have enough stats on board and enough removal in hand that we know for a fact that we can win a 2-for-0 here and keep the game alive. Now, winning a 2-for-0 here, obviously, apart from the obvious fact that not going anything less would lose us the game, It also gets us only 3 expeditions away from winning with our Armourer Pigs combo. So if we can play that out 2 turns in a row entirely uninterrupted, we would fairly comfortably win the game. So that is the win con that we are playing towards, and why we take the line that we do moving forward. So our opponent plays out their sleight of hand, exposes something from their hand in order to protect the Magpeng Hoarder. And now that we know our opponent can only play 2 creatures out. We know that the 2 creatures that we have in hand actually beat them if we can get rid of one of theirs. So as we move forward, playing with our perfect information, we know that what our opponent does is largely irrelevant. So we'll check and see, just talking through which card to play initially, and I think coming to the realization that we have a deterministic 2 for nothing here, and we choose to discard the Will o' the Wisp. As a 3 mana blue creature, or a 3 power in blue creature, it actually beats our Haven Bouncer 1 for 1 if we do nothing to boost it. And then these boosts are largely irrelevant because we know that we're going to be getting rid of that Magpeng Hoarder finally. Okay, we pass, our opponent passes, and as discussed previously, our opponent will have access to 1 card in reserve, 1 card in hand, and we are looking to fade removal. We can draw an additional card, so we see 3 off the top, so we're in a better position there, and we chose to get rid of the Tolarian Skater. Now, for a different reason to why we kept the Duel of Grit around last time, we've put the Skater into mana because it allows us to play the Haven Bouncer out from reserve and still play out the combo, which does come into play, and it is exactly what we do. Activate both of our landmarks early, so if they do have the landmark removal, at least they can't stop us from winning anything. Take a moment to see if the Sarengar changes anything, and it doesn't. So the Pigs combo, as a in terms of interaction, is weak to removal of the pigs, because you're allowed to cycle through it as much as you like, but once the combo is finished, you end up with some number of boosts on the pigs, the same number of boosts on the armorer, and that same number of brass bugs on the side of the armorer. So you're vulnerable to removal of the pigs. So cards like Hooked would do it. I believe Requiem doesn't hit it at this point because we're not in green. Cloth Cocoon also not, but if they are able to move that pigs over to the same side as the armorer, they can interact. So playing out the Bouncer insulates us against that by having a second creature on the same side as that piggy. I do mention that in the initial video, but there are a couple of little notes that I wanted to make apparent here at this point specifically. So we don't know what that card is in hand. We identified removal spells and the card Hooked specifically as scare cards. I also mentioned Sap Duende in the video, as a reason for us to alternate which card we give the second boost to while actioning our combo. So obviously one of them has to go to the Foundry Armorer, and we actually split them between the pigs and the bouncer. So we'll just get that running because I think it goes for about 30 seconds here at double speed. And we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into this because we do let it run. Obviously it's fun, but you know, there is actually a point where we can deterministically tell that we win, and it actually comes fairly early here. Now, I'm talking about Sapduende at this point, taking boosts off of one of our boosted creatures and adding it onto the Will-o'-the-Wisp, and that being a reason that I alternate between the bouncer and the pigs. I keep coming back to it, but we actually don't need to do that. So if we give all of the boosts to the pigs, we're completely safe for two reasons. One, the pig has tough 1, so they can't actually target it with the Sapduende. And if they target the Foundry Armorer, taking its boosts to give to the Will-o'-the-Wisp, it's actually a losing play for them, because even taking away that boost, we're still getting 2 boosts per iteration of the combo because of the brass bug. So they can take at most 1 per cycle, whereas we're going up by 2 there. So we're going to do a quick deep dive into this and see how far we actually needed to go. I think you'll be surprised. So give me one moment. I'm just going to open up Microsoft Paint. And we're back. Thanks for waiting. So in the bottom right corner we have the situation as it is before we action our combo. So at this point we should be thinking, how many times do we need to action it to make it impossible for our opponent to win? We've identified 3 particular cards that will most impact the board. So anything that our opponent does instead of these 3 things would change the state of the game less than these. So if we cover for these 3, we cover for everything. Those are Sapduende, Hooked, and this one over here is Lyra Navigator. So for 2 mana that our opponent is currently representing, that provides the most power in an expedition that our opponent could win. So that the stats on that card actually read 0, 0, 4 plus their current 0, 0, 3 leaves us with 0, 0, 7. So we'll delete these, select, and move it across. So that's what we're battling here. Sapduende is a way for our opponent to swap off the boost that we give the armorer, and as we've spoken about already, this should be a losing play for them if we go sufficiently large, because we can actually get 2 power every time we cycle, and they're only able to take 1 away. So this one is a little bit funkier. So when we math this out, eventually we get it down to basically 1 number. So if they swap it, they'll have 0, 0, 3 plus n, where n is the number of iterations that we do, and they'll be competing against 3, 3, 2 plus 2n. Now, this represents the growth of the brass bugs on our side. So what we're looking at here, the closest these ever get is that blue stat for the ones that are relevant, So we're looking for the smallest possible solution of 3 plus n being less than 2 plus 2n. And then with hooked, presuming that our opponent will move our Foundry Armorer away, it's basically all we're looking for is 2n being greater than 3. So we'll start with the easy one first. Obviously, with hooked, if we cycle it through twice, we end up with 4 power in blue, and so we would win there against hooked. Against the Lyra Navigator, because they can't interact in any other way, we're looking for 7 being less than 2 plus 3n. This one is true for 2 as well, so 2 plus 3 times 2 is 8, so we would end up with 8 power if we cycle through twice. And then the only one that we actually need to figure out is this one here, which is a little bit funkier. So if we just punch in 2 here, 3 plus 2 is 5, 2 plus 4 is 6, so we actually win 2 there. So after this short aside, I guess you now know I was being a little bit rude to my opponent, because anything over 2 power, or 2 boosts plus 2 brass bugs actually ends up winning us the game. Alright, back to the gameplay. And we're back to the game. So we've skipped ahead to the end of that day. Now we both know. Basically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these brass bugs were completely useless. But that's okay. In paper, you can just shortcut that once you demonstrate the loop once, similar to other TCGs. You are able to just nominate a number of times that you drop that. I suppose there would be situations where you want to do that beyond what is enough to win. Say you've got non-rare copies of the mess on the field. You say, I want to put a million counters on it. Perfectly fine to do that, still wins you. But we've skipped through actually clicking out the combo. I'm not going to make you sit through that again. And we've tied everything up. So we are in the lead here, I would argue. Moving into this, what should be the final turn of the game. We have access to 6 cards, to our opponent's 3. Playing out the combo the way we did, they did leave an extra card in there. And then they resupply a 4th card as well. So looking at our hand, that from what we've drawn after the morning, the Eclut is going to be important. We actually, however, are unable to play that alongside our combo. That's 12 mana from when you're playing it from reserve, but the added interaction of exhausting one of your opponent's cards when you've got more options than them is actually a pretty big deal. We play out the 3 little pigs here first, for pretty much one reason. Firstly, leading with it makes it a massive threat, because any creatures that you follow up with including the Foundry armor that they now are aware of. Represents another infinite combo, so it becomes a bit of a lightning rod for removal. And then as we play it out, I believe we are discussing whether to play the Foundry armor or not. So our opponent does play the removal, the tough one coming into play here, so it leaves them with 3 mana to our 7. And as we math out this final turn, we realise with the cost reduction as the what's usually flavor text but actually a support ability on our Foundry armor, we can actually play everything out left in our hand. If we exhaust with the Eclut, we can reduce them down to only having 2 remaining cards, regardless of whether they can pay for them with the mana or not. We even get to draw an additional card due to the removal. The Pastry Chef is entirely irrelevant. And we have actually several ways to win this game. Playing out the Foundry Armorer and the Duel of Grit, removal plus the most stats that we can get for the mana we invest, is actually a worse play than the line that we take, because it loses to them having a 1 drop in hand, something like that Martingale. So how that would play out is that we play out the Armourer, give it the boost to get 2 Brass Bugs, all on the same side. They can play out their I suppose, yeah. Playing out the Will-O-Wisp on the other side actually doesn't do anything, because they've got no stats in green. But if they have 2 creatures in hand anyway, that they can play for their 3 mana, we remove 1, they play out their second creature, and we go into a tiebreaker. Obviously we're favoured in that, but this line just sort of shuts that off as well. So they did have the Martingale, so if their remaining creature in hand was a 2-drop at this point, we would be tying. In the end, I believe it is not actually a creature, and we just play out our Sarengar to win on that side anyway. So if they don't do anything else, they can't interact with our board, they're likely to lose. Last card in their hand is an off you go, and we can respond by removing their creature, winning 1-0 and taking the game. Very exciting one. Obviously a lot of things that had to go right for us to be able to peel that back, but obviously as well we put ourselves in a situation that was a little bit more dire than it needed to be. I'd say if we were to define it, we ended up winning that game by paying attention, making minimizing the value that our opponent got out of their cycled cards. Obviously they cycled around a lot and it gave us a lot of time. We'll talk about that in a second, and obviously being able to keep up in card advantage. So one of the things that Fen does really well is you actually get to see 2 cards every turn. You don't get to decide what they are. Card goes into mana, card gets resupplied, but you get the mana plus 2 cards, whereas we have to make a decision. It's either 2 cards or the mana, and the card advantage that we gained from playing out the mess nice and early there really kept us in that game and in the driver's seat once we wanted to take over. The fact that our opponent was cycling sleight of hands really limited what they could do on their turn. Obviously it works as a repeatable 1 mana after you effect when you've got a couple of them, but Ouroboros Incaster as a way to recycle your cards definitely feels more threatening as it pressures the board and cycles the cards. And what that did was that gave us time to breathe and catch up a little bit and make up for the mistakes that we made in those middle turns. The things that I was really happy that I did this game was paying attention to the known information that we were getting from our opponent. Obviously, you always see the card that they resupply, so you know half of what it is that they're able to do on each turn. But with the cycling, it's pretty easy to lose track of what cards it is that your opponent's got in hand. So playing around that really helped us figure out what it is we wanted to do and plan. Not necessarily days in advance, but how we wanted to sequence our cards, and that really let us create situations where we knew we could win. And finally, patience. So not pulling the trigger on the combo early, I think got us back into the game after we went down, by 4 expeditions. I think, earlier on playing this game, I'm hesitant to call it a career at this point, but earlier on, I may have just panicked and said, okay, well, we've got something that we can deal with, that can deal with anything they throw at us, so let's just put it out there. But identifying that the 2-for-nothing win con the turn before playing the combo, I'm really happy with that. Obviously, this isn't going to be every game, but we do enjoy them when they come around. So this is one I'll remember, and I hope that this has been informative for you. Sorry we couldn't get any games in for this week, but yeah, my best friend's getting married, so very thankful. One of my best friends, I should say. I'm very lucky to have more than one, so I'm going to be celebrating with him instead of playing Altered. Back to it next week. We'll see what it is that we've got in store. There's a couple of ideas, been talking about it lately. Starting to run out of ideas, but thank you to Ajordat specifically for making the comment. One of 2 options is going to be a landmark-based Sigismund deck. You can obviously look at the other heroes as well, but that's where they left the comment. And the other one will be, if Helping Hand comes back with a Fanis and Senka, we're going to pull out Spelunky again. Closing statements. Thanks to you for watching through this video. It's a bit of a slog. It gets dry at points. I think I'm just a bit dry, both in humour and delivery. So I really appreciate you sitting through. Hopefully you learned something. We'll see you next week. Love your work. Bye.